Hey, everybody. This is Lauren Delisa Coleman, and I'm back with you again for another episode of the Inside series that we bring you right here on film.io, giving you really an in-depth look of just all the behind the scenes from various filmmakers working on some amazing projects out here today. But I am super into this one because this is actually our first interview with a real live editor of a documentary. Typically, we talk a lot with directors, writers, producers, and actors, but I'm really, really into this one because, this is kind of a voice that has not been represented just yet. And I think the editor in general is like kind of, usually on the DL, right? Even though with the Academy Awards. So we're going to bring that out more to the forefront. And so let me start by welcoming Sarah Keeling, who is the editor of many things. But we're going to talk today about Dear Philadelphia, a documentary at Blackstar Film Festival. So Sarah, first of all, welcome to film.io. So happy to have you. She is coming to us live and direct from London. She is like so busy and so in demand because, and I can't even like name all the things, but between Vice Tonight, Burberry, various documentaries, what else am I forgetting? BBC. Sarah, you're like really doing your thing, right? Like, how are you even awake
I'm not very awake right now. But yeah, I'm lucky. I love my job, so
I can tell because I was like, well, we can schedule for later. And you're like, no, it's going to be straight through like this and talk. So I was like, okay. But let's start. We typically ask our wonderful guests to give us a synopsis of the film that we're talking about. So in this case, Dear Philadelphia, which is appropriate since Blackstar Film Festival takes place in Philadelphia, but you guys also were at Sundance. So give me really, I guess, the highlights of this wonderful 28-minute documentary.
So Dear Philadelphia is, well, it's sort of an ensemble documentary, I guess you could say. We sort of, the director filmed so many people's stories on various trips to Philadelphia, and we sort of teased out these three fathers who really seemed to have stories that really needed telling and were quite probably stories that you just don't see very often, or that you see represented in the sort of positive light that we wanted to show that was the truth of their stories, essentially. So it became a film about fatherhood, really, and fatherhood sort of in the context of community, and a community that's again often quite misrepresented, but has a lot, like so much positivity and love. And there's also a theme of forgiveness that runs through kind of all of the stories as well. It's not very quick synopsis, but that's what it's about.
No, that's great. It's actually a little bit quicker, I think, than some others that we've had. Everybody, just does his or her own thing. That's the cool thing about this series. What do you think in kind of capturing these three stories? You mentioned that it's what people might not typically see. Can you bring out maybe an example, from your point of view, not mine having watched it, but, that we see that we wouldn't typically kind of think of? Because I also love in the trailer how there's this line that says something about, there are two sides to people, and, there's one that's happening and one side where they're kind of becoming or who they're becoming. I think that's just intriguing in and of itself. So maybe that kind of ties into, kind of what we see or like I said, I want to leave it to you to give the exact example though.
Yeah. Well, the line you pick up from the trailer is that it's, again, it's this community that's in North Philadelphia that's often quite vilified and is quite misunderstood. And the director on her trips there very much felt like, this was a place that was so welcoming, and there's such a sense of community and these really strong bonds across community, and a lot of healing that happens as well that just really kind of goes unseen. And people that might, that we have these two guys in the film who they say themselves, they think without some of the things they get involved in, they'd be living maybe, or they maybe wouldn't be the sort of calm, settled people that they are. And that's kind of a motif that goes throughout it, like the sense of community that sort of holds people up and brings them together in the face of adversity. And yeah, I guess that, again, the thing of the fatherhood aspect something that the director and I spoke about a fair bit was that Black fatherhood is often, again, really poorly represented in the media, in various forms of media. And that's the opposite of what most people's experiences are. And it's just not, and it's quite painful to see how misrepresented that as a subject is. So when we had this beautiful footage in that they captured of these three fathers in particular, and it was just very clear that was what the story was. And the director's actually done a really beautiful series in London recently of more fathers. You can Google it. It's very easy to find, and it's really beautiful as well. So
that's very cool. And it's so interesting that you say this because, of course, no ethnic background is a monolith. So you have good Black fathers and bad Black fathers and, medium. And like you said, we're kind of just push the one kind of tagline, if you will. And especially, North Philadelphia, I think that the media, when North Philadelphia comes to my mind, I think Temple University. And then I think immediately, different stories about people in the area stealing from Temple students. And so that's kind of the picture that you have, especially driving down Broad Street. It hasn't been developed, in many years, decades, really, right? So, but if you go behind either side of Broad Street, which you guys may know is like the main street into or out of Philadelphia, it leads down to City Hall. There's a whole world's going on there. And was it first to say, I don't really know that. You think hopefully it could exist, but you don't see it. So how did you get brought into this project, Sarah, especially being there in London? Of course, though everything, can be remote, but I was just so surprised to see where, you were based and the previous work that you've done.
So the director's actually based in London as well. She's a born and bred Londoner. But her link to this. Yeah, well, she lives in London, but her link to Philadelphia is through her church, and that's how she got to know quite a few of the people in the film. So she knows that most of the people in the film personally, and then there were lots of people that were sort of introduced to the team along the shoot. So for that reason, it obviously made sense to have an editor in London. But we literally had one meeting before the pandemic hit, and in person. Two meetings maybe, and then that was it. And we just had to do the whole thing remote from that point. So
did you guys shoot the film actually during the pandemic, or did you?
No, it was all shot before. Yeah.
Okay, so you had the meeting
after
all the footage was in. So is that typically how your projects go, or can it really vary? Can you be brought in even in pre-production and be like, just so you know, we'd love to, you to edit this and it will probably be ready at XYZ date, or can it be in this case, or what?
Usually we come in quite late, but most editors would say it definitely helps a project if you can tie down an editor beforehand. Just for things like just tech workflows, things like that. If you have someone who understands that end of things involved earlier, it just kind of helps smooth things out as you go along. But usually often that's kind of a thing that you're not thinking about when you're, planning shoots and you're planning your story and stuff. So this one I was at the end, which is quite normal.
So how did you come to, I guess, where you are in your career right now, Sarah? Your site is very cool. I love that it's very clean, very editor, looking.
Yeah.
And, but there's these major brands and all that on there. Obviously, that's taken time to build. So how did you kind of come to editing? I know obviously your formal educational background, but then there's, all of the who do you know and how do you get to show your work and, building even examples of that work. What was your particular story kind of like?
Well, I started out filming and editing, so a little bit of both. And then editing just kind of became the thing that took over, really. I found more work doing that and I just really enjoyed it. So I sort of started focusing on that. And then up until the past sort of 4 years or so, I was doing short form editing. So commercials and fashion films and short docs and things like that. And then a director that I was working with ended up doing a short TV series, a documentary series. She took me with her onto that. And then yeah, ever since I've kind of done more long form film and TV. And
Is that your preferred medium, or are you just, you're up for anything? Because I mean, obviously, like with Burberry, that is, a different type altogether. So, I mean, and I'm sure each one brings different challenges.
Yeah, definitely. I do pretty much 90% long form now. But then there's I don't know, for an editor, sometimes doing something that's short form and quite quick, and you kind of get from A to B quite quickly is that's quite a nice sort of refresher. So I do short occasionally, but mostly long form nowadays.
I just think it's so amazing. Like editors are just like, to me, like, magicians, because it's something that I just am so not good at. Like, even if I have to do something on iMovie, I just like put it off and dread it. And I mean, it's just like a small thing that I might be doing for YouTube. Yeah. Like, no. And I remember I started my career more or less working in production at MTV. And so we would sit with, obviously with the editors, and it's just really amazing to see, you guys work. What do you think personality wise or professional, but either or both, makes for a good editor?
I think you really have to be a people person, because a lot of what you do is kind of analyzing behavior on screen, or analyzing language and dialogue and all this. And actually, and like for a long time, I think there was a bit of a stereotype that editors were quite, maybe a little bit antisocial, a little bit grumpy, because, it's such a solitary job. And so it sometimes it does suit some people who don't want to spend loads of time with other people. But I think that's maybe a bit of a misunderstanding and a misrepresentation, because most editors I know are lovely and actually really love people. And that's why we like to do this, because it's all about, you spend your whole day watching people. So it's, and in terms of the sort of the more analytical side of the job, I guess it's, you have to be able to understand people. It all comes back to people. It's a people job, really, just despite being so solitary in its like execution.
That's so amazing that you say that, because I always picture, either from my own past experience or just in general, editors being seemingly rather reserved and in the dark, and like that's just how it is, you know what I mean? But the way that you describe it is it's like obvious after you say it, but I think people in a different way, like you said, much more analytical, more inside of the head, not really maybe interacting as much, and that's what helps them excel at what they do. But to go back quickly to what you were saying before for a second, that it helps if a filmmaker is able to, kind of at least give maybe some general idea to an editor who he or she might select early on. What other tips might you have for filmmakers in terms of working with their editors to be able to get, the best experience?
For documentaries specifically, it really helps to be if you really know your footage, and you can really kind of guide someone before they get started, so that as the editors watching everything, they have a good understanding of what you're looking to make from what you have. Transcripts it's a boring one, but it's not everyone thinks of this for documentary as well, is getting transcripts, because if you can read an interview, your editor will like imbibe that information 100 times quicker than if they have to sit and watch an interview 3 times to make sense of it. And I guess being open-minded, because sometimes like we will sit with the footage actually longer than a director or producer will, and sometimes we get to know things in a way that a director won't. So directors that come into an edit and are really flexible will probably end up with a better film, instead of coming in with a sort of really rigid idea of what they think the footage has, because sometimes that doesn't always translate when you actually get it into the edit and you really sit with it and pull it apart.
Wow, I just think that's really insightful. How do you keep up on like tech changes in your industry, Sarah? Because I'm sure there are many, and then you have to like either relearn something, or it's, some new type of thing or whatever. And maybe it's not as hot as, people think it is, or it's buggy. How do you actually like personally like just stay up on things? Because when you're spending so much time editing, like you don't have a gang of time to read like trades as well and stuff, right?
No.
Are you guys just kind of like always talking, together as editors, or things just like it pops up, or like one person says something, it's kind of almost like whisper down the lane, like this is hot and coming out, like you should try it. I'm interested in that tech side for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's in the UK and the US, actually, there's a lot of the chat is still on Facebook, which is kind of a dying medium. But for editors, we not everyone, but there's a fairly active sort of social network where lots of tips like that, or you can go if you're having a problem that you're trying to fix, you can go to a group and say, like, this is my issue, who can fix it for me, and you'll get answers. But in terms of the tech changing, things update, but I mean, like the edit that I've got going on now, like I'm remoting into a post house in central London at the moment, and I'm on a version of Avid from like 2018, and that's just what the post house runs still. So the main software doesn't change too quickly, but when there's like a little useful update, people will talk about it. But it's not sort of lightning fast. I mean, there's new softwares that come out, like DaVinci Resolve is kind of gaining traction because it's free. And so if you're learning to edit now, like, why would you not learn on the free software that's movie quality? Why would you not use that? So there's developments like that. So it's good to know as many softwares as possible, but most, particularly film and TV editors, will know Avid and maybe Premiere.
Right. Avid's massive.
Yeah.
What do you think about 5G? I mean, there's been so much discussion, at least at certain levels of the industry here in the US, that 5G is going to change, of course, many things. But, when you look at this particular area and this sub-like kind of area of the industry, about how it will enable easier and, of course, remote editing. What do you think about that?
I mean, we have pretty clunky Wi-Fi in the UK. We're kind of known for our pretty rubbish Wi-Fi. So, yeah, I mean, it's not a conversation I've really had, actually, about 5G enabling remote editing, but I suppose there's more and more editing, and particularly like at the early stages that happens, particularly drama, sort of closer to the set. So anything.
That's absolutely. That's some of the discussion that IBM has been having for sure around that. So I think it will help.
I mean, I'm always for extra speed. Positives in technology are always going to help us move faster and get things to deadline quicker, which is always the sort of bottom line, really. So
right. Well, I'm just so glad that you could take the time out, and we really wish you continued success. And everybody, thank you so much for watching. I'm hoping that this has been interesting to you from the editor side, because it's just, so crucial, and it's very cool to be able to start to see the people behind that part of the industry. So again, thank you so much for watching. This has been the Inside series on film.io, and I am Lauren Delisa Coleman.